Welcome to every appearance of Composure, written by nom de plume Eden Forster and beautifully read by Anna, a professional human voice replica. Immerse yourself in this charming Regency era historical romance that will captivate your heart and imagination. Chapter 1.
"You must come to the wedding,"
said Charles Bingley.
"I would not be standing here with my happy news if not for you informing me my dearest Jane was in town all those weeks ago, and encouraging me to pursue her, my friend. What is more, I want you to stand beside me. There is someone who would say you and Miss Bennet might well have been husband and wife months ago, if not for my interference."
Fitzwilliam Darcy thought. The remembrance of that certain someone haunted him still. A part of him knew he would never forget her. The part of him in want of a wife of his own. At nearly 28, Darcy reasoned it was time. He had put off finding the woman to whom he wished to devote the rest of his life long enough. His needs as a man aside, he was the master of Pemberley, which was renowned as one of the finest estates in all of Derbyshire, and Pemberley needed an heir. Only one woman had ever tempted him to offer his hand in marriage. That woman was Miss Elizabeth Bennet, the younger sister of his friend's intended. Miss Elizabeth was unlike any other woman he had ever known, and she had bewitched him with her dark eyes and her light and pleasing figure. Many weeks had gone by since he last saw her in Kent. He had come close to making the biggest mistake of his life. Having delayed his departure from Kent, where he and his cousin Colonel Richard Fitzwilliam were visiting their aunt Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Darcy had finally cast aside all his doubts and determined to propose marriage to Elizabeth. Despite suffering severe misgivings about the prospect of an alliance with such relations as hers, and having done everything in his power to save his friend Bingley, who now stood before him, from such a circumstance were he to marry the oldest Bennet daughter, Darcy had persuaded himself that he loved Elizabeth most ardently. A fortuitous discussion with the Colonel just before setting out to call on the young woman at the parsonage house in Hunsford spared Darcy what might have turned out a disaster. When his aunt's vicar, Mr. Collins, and his wife showed up at Rosings on the evening before Darcy was due to return to town, bearing the news that their house-guest, Miss Elizabeth, had taken ill and would not be joining them, Richard's disappointment had been unmistakable. Seeing his cousin thus caused Darcy some concern. He was aware that his cousin admired the young woman. She seemed to like the Colonel as well. If there was but one thing he envied his cousin, it was the Colonel's easy manner of forming new acquaintances. Indeed, he had been counting on Richard's approval of Elizabeth when he presented her to the rest of the Fitzwilliam family as the future Mrs. Darcy. Darcy had drawn his cousin aside to interrogate him on his odd response to the Collinses' news about Miss Elizabeth's health.
"I was with the young lady earlier this afternoon. I cannot help wondering whether her sudden illness is an after-effect of our conversation,"
the Colonel had replied. "Why would you presume your conversation had anything to do with the present state of her health?"
"When I came upon Miss Elizabeth earlier this afternoon, her spirits were as high as ever. However, by the conclusion of our exchange, she looked as if she had lost her dearest friend. Granted, our acquaintance is of a small duration. However, I declare I have never observed her looking so desolate."
"I find it puzzling that her spirits could have been so altered so quickly. What did you say to her?" Darcy had asked, somewhat dreading his relative's reply. The Colonel shrugged.
"I merely informed her that you had been in such admirable service to your friend Bingley last summer by shielding him from a most unsuitable alliance with a dreadful family severely in want of propriety, with no fortune and no connections."
Darcy took a sharp breath. "I told you what I did in confidence, Fitzwilliam."
"I did not think the two of you were so connected that she would have cause to suppose your actions objectionable."
Richard had continued on to explain that Elizabeth immediately established that the family in question was none other than her own. She had accused Darcy of mean-spiritedness in breaking up two young people who were in love with each other. He had subjected his friend to censure and caprice, and her sister to derision and disappointed hopes. Elizabeth had said she always suspected that officious man had a hand in tearing her sister and Mr. Bingley apart, and even though she always detested him, she had hoped she was wrong. She had wound up her speech by declaring she hoped never to see the high and mighty Mr. Darcy again. Darcy's eyes had been opened wide by this revelation. He had been an hour away from offering his hand, his heart, and his home to a young woman who boasted to his own relation of despising him. An agreeable young fellow who was as jubilant as one on the heels of marrying the woman of his dreams ought to be, Charles Bingley cleared his throat. "Darcy, I do not believe you have attended a word I have said. You must tell me whether you accept my offer. Otherwise I will have to ask my brother Hurst, and you know how much he abhors that sort of thing." Shaken from his reverie, Darcy swallowed hard. Since coming back from Kent, he had made several starts and stops on a letter to Miss Elizabeth Bennet, in which he sought to explain his reason for interfering in the budding relationship between her sister and his friend. He wanted her to know he had behaved not out of meanness of spirit, rather he had acted in service to his friend. He had observed Bingley and Miss Bennet most attentively when they were together in Hertfordshire, and he was persuaded his friend's attachment was fonder than the lady's. Moreover, his friend was always falling in love with one young lady or another, and Darcy had no reason to suppose this time was different. Having decided that actions were more potent than words scrawled on a piece of paper, he proceeded to go instead to his friend with a complete explanation of his role in keeping the couple apart. What excuse could he now offer for not wishing to be a part of this most consequential day in his friend's life? He had to agree to the scheme. On the other hand, answering yes to Bingley would bring him face to face with the woman who had broken his heart. The possibility that she had done so unknowingly must surely count for something.
When we meet, it need not be of greater consequence than a meeting between indifferent acquaintances,
Darcy considered. With that thought in mind, he reached out his hand to his impatient friend.
"I shall be honoured to stand next to you, Charles."
After delicately arranging the last of the pins in place, Elizabeth stood behind her eldest sister Jane, and marvelled at her handiwork. Both ladies looking in the mirror, their merriment-filled eyes settled on each other's. A comely young woman with an angelic countenance, Jane gave one of her golden locks a slight tug. Impressed by her sister's efforts, she beamed. "It looks lovely, Lizzie. I dare say Charles will be pleased." Elizabeth placed her hands on her hips. "Jane, you could show up at the altar with a cloth sack on your head, and your Mr. Bingley would not be disappointed." "Oh, Lizzie, I suspect what you say is true. Who would have thought Charles would call on me at my uncle's house in Cheapside, and just when I had given up all expectation of ever seeing him again after I visited his sister Caroline?" The bringing up of Miss Caroline Bingley's name was almost sufficient to wash away the joy Elizabeth felt in seeing her sister so happy once again. Had that young woman had her way, Jane and Bingley may never have become engaged. If there was anything disadvantageous about her dearest sister's pending union, it was that she would permanently be connected to such a pernicious sister-in-law. "Yes," Elizabeth began, in an attempt to force such an unpleasant prospect behind her. "And now here we are, weeks later, preparing for your impending nuptials. Just imagine, in hardly any time at all, I am to become Mrs. Charles Bingley, the mistress of Netherfield. I am a happy woman indeed." "No one deserves such happiness more than you." Jane sighed. promptly causing her sister to wonder what was the matter. "Jane! I do wish all my sisters were here to take part in what is certain to be the happiest day of my life." "You must not allow Lydia's insistence on accompanying the Forsters to Brighton to impede on your joy, my dear. What is the marriage of an older sister in comparison with the spectacle of officers as far as the eyes can see?" "I do hope Papa knows what he was about in allowing someone with Lydia's wild spirits to be so far from home and beyond her parents' supervision. He is certain this time in Brighton will teach Lydia of her own insignificance. I tend to agree with him. The officers will not give her a second glance. I am confident." "Oh, Lizzie, I pray you and Papa are correct." Shifting the topic, Elizabeth inquired, "When will Mr. Bingley return from London?" "I shall hope to see him in 3 days." Jane turned to study her dear sister. "Lizzie, I pray it does not disappoint you that Charles insists on asking Mr. Darcy to stand up for him at the wedding." Elizabeth shrugged. "Why should I be disappointed? I know how your Mr. Bingley depends on his friend." "He does indeed. However, you and Mr. Darcy did not get along at all when he was here in Hertfordshire last autumn." "This is true." Elizabeth smiled in spite of herself. "Dare I say the gentleman and I coexisted quite amiably when we were in Kent." Indeed, she had found his manners decidedly improved when they were together in Kent. However, any favourable impression his change in attitude might have garnered was tarnished when Mr. Darcy's cousin, Colonel Richard Fitzwilliam, inadvertently confided in her that Darcy had aided in separating her sister Jane and Bingley. No doubt the Colonel informed his officious cousin of my response to that bit of intelligence, she thought. Elizabeth further attributed Mr. Darcy's failure to call on the Collinses with the Colonel before leaving Kent as confirmation of that gentleman's mean-spirited intentions. She would have been lying to herself if she did not confess that a part of her suspected that Mr. Darcy may have had a hand in undoing the damage he had brought about. If she learned this to be true, Elizabeth supposed the least she might do was acknowledge it when she saw him next. On the other hand, why should I show him any gratitude for being the means of my sister's present happiness when he caused her prior unhappiness? Elizabeth wondered. Oh, I will not think about any of that now. I shall see how he behaves should he return to Hertfordshire with Bingley for the wedding. Then I will know how to act. Pleased with her resolve, Elizabeth told her sister that it was much too fine a day to spend the better part of it indoors. Jane agreed, and before long they headed downstairs and out the door. The two young ladies proceeded in silence along the gravel walk that led to the copse, both thinking of the wedding, no doubt, however, for altogether different reasons. Chapter 2. Darcy glanced up from his letter when the door of his study swung open, and in marched his aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. He put his pen aside, rose from his richly appointed leather chair, and strode over to greet her properly.
"Lady Catherine," he said, bowing, "to what do I owe the honour of your company?"
"You can have no doubt of my reason for being here," she said, not taking the trouble of the usual civilities and claiming a seat in an inviting chair by the fireplace. With a slight roll of his eye, Darcy took the opposite chair.
"I am afraid I do not know to what I must credit this visit, but by your tone, this is not a social call."
Indeed, his noble relation had afforded him a measure of rudeness and disagreeableness she normally reserved for those outside her family. He could not imagine what he had done to deserve it, but no doubt he was about to find out.
"How may I be of service?"
"I have learned from Mr. Collins and his wife that your friend Charles Bingley is soon to be married to a Miss Jane Bennet, Miss Elizabeth Bennet's eldest sister."
"Indeed he is. Pray what can any of that have to do with you?"
It is my ardent wish that you might be swayed to follow your friend's example. You must be mindful of your duty. You will need to beget an heir. My Anne is of an age where she ought to be bearing children. She must do it now while her health will allow." Darcy stood and then strolled across the room to pour himself a drink.
"Pray you did not come all this way to resurrect those ill-fated sentiments."
"I will not abide your insolence, young man. You more than anyone have a duty to marry in order to protect your family's legacy and to marry well. What is more, you have a duty to honour your obligation to your Fitzwilliam family. It was the favourite wish of your mother, my beloved sister Lady Anne, as well as my own, that you should marry your cousin Anne. I will not be dissuaded, young man. You will do as you are expected. Nothing short of you marrying another will detract me from my purposes." Darcy was beginning to suspect his aunt was speaking the truth. He had put her off for more than 6 years and counting since he reached the age of majority. Nothing he could say could convince her to give up on her foolish wish. "Nothing short of you marrying another will detract me from my purposes," he silently deliberated. He then considered the irony of his predicament with Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
"If only there was another woman for me."
"Pray, what on earth are you waiting for?" Lady Catherine demanded, punctuating his musings. "Your friend has wasted no time in securing a wife, albeit one with no connections and no fortune. A foolish prospect indeed. But I suppose such an alliance is safe enough for him in the face of his own family's history. I contend the time has come for you to marry as well."
"I must confess to having given the matter a great deal of consideration of late," Darcy replied, "although you will not be pleased to know the direction my thoughts have tended."
"How might I not be contented to realise you are finally ready to fulfil my fondest wish? That is, unless you merely mean to suspend my pleasure with a lengthy courtship period before making Anne your bride."
"It is not Anne who has me thinking of marriage. I speak of another young woman."
"This cannot be. Who is this young lady who would dare to entertain an offer of marriage from you? Who among our circle does not know of your engagement to my daughter?"
"She is not from among our circle."
"Then who on earth is she? Who is her father? How long have you known her? Do I know her?"
"I can safely say you have established the young woman's acquaintance. I will not say more at this time. Soon enough you will know all there is to know, as I will shortly be in company with her again."
Though disguise of such sort was Darcy's abhorrence, he did not suppose he had committed such a great offence. He had entertained the idea of marrying Elizabeth, and he would indeed be in company with her soon. As much as it pained him still to know that she did not hold him in as high esteem as he held her, he really did not plan to be in company with her for very long.
"As soon as Charles and his new wife set off for their wedding journey, I shall take my leave of Hertfordshire as well,"
he silently resolved. In the meantime, his purposes in persuading his aunt to give up her foolish idea of a union between Anne and him would be carried out for a bit longer. Drawing her head back, Lady Catherine declared, "I demand to know more about this young woman."
"I have said all I intend to say for now. You will know more when the time is appropriate."
Rising up from her chair, her ladyship prepared to quit the room. "Where are you going?" Darcy asked.
"Will you not take tea before leaving?"
"I have no intention of staying and feigning polite conversation in light of your secrecy. You have sadly mistaken my character. If you suppose for one instant I will not do all that is in my power to discover the identity of this mystery woman whom you intend to marry." Lady Catherine nearly lost her footing in her haste to quit her nephew's townhouse. Her mind querying itself at a frenzied pace, for a moment or two it occurred to her ladyship that the young woman of whom her nephew spoke might be no one other than the Collinses' pretty guest from Hertfordshire, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Her nephew had gone out of his way to be civil to her, Lady Catherine recalled. She knew he had called on her, along with her nephew Colonel Fitzwilliam, at the parsonage house soon after their arrival in Kent. She had also paid attention to the manner in which her nephews were drawn to that young lady at Rosings, when she exhibited rather unremarkably on the pianoforte. Then, too, she detected that the young woman was far more amicable towards Fitzwilliam than towards Darcy, somewhat negating the possibility she might be the woman to whom her nephew was referring. What other young woman is a mutual acquaintance of the two of us? Lady Catherine silently questioned. Surely not that dreadful Miss Bingley. Her ladyship shuddered. He would not dare. Accepting her coat from Darcy's butler, she said, I am determined to discover the truth, and I know precisely where to turn.
I beg your pardon, your ladyship,
the butler respectfully implored. Lady Catherine gave the servant a look meant to quiver even the fiercest of men. I suppose it is I who should beg your pardon. Now move out of my way. Silently apologising, the butler opened the door. Her ladyship brushed past him with barely a care. Her mind was diligently occupied devising a strategy to find out what she needed to know. As luck would have it, Lady Catherine saw her nephew Colonel Richard Fitzwilliam descending from a carriage just as she was about to be handed into her own. Rejecting the attending footman's offer to help her into the stately carriage, she responded, I shall require a moment. With the aid of her cane, she made her way to her nephew, who stood waiting for her.
Lady Catherine,
the Colonel said, bowing a little,
it is a surprise to see you here in London so soon after leaving you in Kent, albeit a delightful one.
Nephew, she began, you are just the person I had hoped to see. I have received rather cryptic news from your cousin Darcy, and I am hoping you can shed light on the matter. An affable young man whose esteem as a nephew was second only to Darcy's in Lady Catherine's estimation, he retorted,
How can I help?
Come with me, I wish to have a word with you. The Colonel glanced back at the townhouse.
Darcy is expecting me.
I am certain that whatever business you have with your cousin can wait. Join me in my carriage.
Is it so urgent?
Indeed, it is a matter of utmost importance. I am not in the habit of brooking disappointment. You will join me. She spun round to proceed to the awaiting carriage. Sensing she was alone in doing so, she glanced over her shoulder. There the Colonel stood looking uncertain of what he should do. Do it now, Lady Catherine commanded. The Colonel, not wishing to cause a spectacle of opposing his aunt on the street, did as he was told. Besides, he meant to do all he could to remain in Lady Catherine's good graces. In his mind, his future livelihood might one day depend on it. A second son of an earl in need of a wife of means, he had not ruled out the possibility he might be the nephew to know his aunt as his mother-in-law some day. When the two of them were settled in the carriage, sitting opposite each other, Lady Catherine signalled to the driver to be on his way. Immediately thereafter, turning her attention to her nephew, she announced, I have just had a most disturbing conversation with your cousin Darcy. He tried to persuade me that he has met a young woman of our mutual acquaintance to whom he is planning to extend his hand in marriage.
What can any of that have to do with me?
Keeping secrets was never one of her nephew's strong points. Everyone who knew him best would attest to that. Come now, nephew, you better than anyone would know whether there is a young woman who has managed to turn your cousin's head. You also know that he is engaged to marry my Anne. I will not have my hopes disappointed.
I assure you, Lady Catherine, that my cousin does not tell me everything. He has informed me, however, that he has no intention of marrying Anne.
You and I know that is utter nonsense. Darcy shall, and he will marry my daughter. Honour and family duty demand it.
If you are so convinced of that, what difference does it make if his head has been turned by another? By your account, honour and obligation to family overrule the heart. do they not?
I shall leave nothing to chance where the uniting of Pemberley and Rosings Park is concerned. Darcy must have given you some hint of whom this woman is. Did he not mention anything at all about her when you were together in Kent?
I suppose he did spend an inordinate amount of time with your vicar's lovely guest, Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
What do you mean? An inordinate amount of time? When did Darcy have occasion to see that young woman, other than when she called at Rosings by my own invitation?
The two of them were known to wander about in the lanes for lengthy stretches of time. Surely you must have observed them. They made no secret of it.
I most assuredly did not know. What could have been his purpose in wasting his time with a young woman of inferior birth and circumstances? Lady Catherine declared, a little disturbed by this intelligence. Her confidence promptly revived. She said, "No doubt she is the one who placed herself in his path."
As for his purpose, I cannot say. I will add, however, that he and I both enjoyed the young lady's company. She is quite comely to say nothing of her wit and her charm. Moreover, she did not seem to be the sort of female who might put herself in anyone's path.
Her ladyship meant to dismiss her suspicion that Miss Elizabeth Bennet was the woman whom her nephew spoke of in his study. Not supposing such a thing truly credible, she decided she would be terribly remiss were she to be put off so easily as this. Besides, it was as good a place to start as any in her hunt for the truth. She would leave not one stone unturned, not even the slightest, most unlikely pebble of uncertainty. Now, having heard all she needed to hear from the Colonel, she knew exactly how to act. Chapter 3. Satisfied he had put his aunt off successfully, at least for the time being, any thought of her threat to determine the mysterious young woman's identity, Darcy banished from his mind. The idea of aligning himself with a family with no connections and no fortune had been difficult enough for Darcy to grasp, even though he had ultimately done it. Surely Lady Catherine would never consider such a notion. Everything about her character forbade it. Curious to know what had become of his cousin, Darcy glanced at the clock on the mantelpiece. He should have arrived an hour ago. Where is he? He silently asked himself. His question was answered a short while later. The Colonel entered the room rather hurriedly. His attitude apologetic, he said,
"Darcy, pray you will forgive my tardiness. I was unavoidably detained."
"By a woman, no doubt," Darcy said, shutting his book and granting his guest his full attention.
"A woman indeed,"
his cousin began.
"I am sure you will want to learn who the woman was and what she had to say."
Darcy shook his head. "I cannot say I do, on either of the two accounts." He knew as well as anyone how his cousin delighted in what was tantamount to gossiping. He wanted no part of it. He still smarted over the Colonel's interference in his affairs in Kent. Things might have turned out very differently had his cousin just held his tongue. The Colonel shrugged.
"As you wish. I suppose you blame me for speaking so freely to Miss Elizabeth Bennet when we were in Kent?"
Darcy picked up a half-empty glass of brandy he had poured earlier and calmly took a sip before silently responding to his cousin with an arched brow.
"You cannot deny it. There has been a fair measure of reluctance on your part to hear anything I have to say of late. Everything concerning the Bennets worked out in the end, did it not?"
said Richard, crossing one leg over the other.
"I understand your friend Bingley is to be married to his lady love after all. So all is well that ends well."
Darcy reflected on the fact that not everything had ended well. He might be the one on the heels of being married if his cousin had not told Elizabeth what he did. This thought gave Darcy pause. With the circumstances being as they were, perhaps everything had indeed turned out for the best. Miss Jane Bennet looked positively radiant that morning. Her younger sisters, Mary and Kitty, the third and fourth Bennet girls respectively, sat on either side of her at the breakfast table. Mrs. Bennet, a woman of a somewhat nervous constitution, bore an expression of sheer satisfaction. Her eldest daughter was to be married to a young man of £5,000 a year. She had indeed formed an excellent match. Adding to her joy was the impending wedding in 2 weeks. In a fortnight her daughter would be the mistress of Netherfield. Jane's good fortune extended to all her girls, for now they were certain to be thrown in the path of other wealthy young men. Elizabeth, the second eldest Bennet daughter, observed her mother's contented smile. She knew without being told what her mother was thinking. Longbourn's matriarch had devoted countless hours in preparation for the wedding of the year. Not willing to chance that Mr. Bingley might change his mind, she had been the one to insist upon an expedited wedding date as soon as the banns were read and the proper amount of time passed. Mrs. Bennet had also insisted the wedding breakfast be held at Netherfield. Her husband certainly did not protest. He had paid out more than he anticipated on his eldest daughter's wedding trousseau. The mistress of the house was going on and on about the arrangements for the wedding feast. Elizabeth gave her father a knowing grin when their eyes met across the breakfast table. It was the family's worst-kept secret that she was her father's favourite. Had it not been for his loving support of her right to choose the man whom she would marry, she would well be married to her odious cousin, Mr. William Collins. Having spent weeks in that man's home during the spring, and observing first-hand how miserable her life would have been as Mrs. Collins, she made a point of thanking her father daily since her return. How unfortunate that her intimate friend, the former Charlotte Lucas, was the one who subsequently chose to marry that horrid man. My friend knew exactly what she was undertaking, and therefore I must not feel too unhappy for her, Elizabeth reminded herself. Still, she was not entirely insensitive to her friend's reasoning. Charlotte was practical, and despite being the wife of one of the most ridiculous men of Elizabeth's acquaintance, Charlotte could now boast of being the mistress of her own home. No such domestic harmony loomed in Elizabeth's imminent future as best she could tell. At nearly 21, her chances were diminishing with each passing day. That Jane's marriage might elevate Elizabeth's chances of securing an advantageous alliance to a man she could honour and esteem was indeed possible, she supposed. However, as the Bingley connection had done nothing at all to advance Miss Caroline Bingley's prospects, Elizabeth did not imagine it would improve her chances either. After all, Miss Bingley boasted of a substantial dowry the likes of which Elizabeth could never dream of for herself. The thought occurred to her that Bingley's elder sister, Mrs. Louisa Hurst, had made a match with a gentleman of leisure, one that befitted her quite well, as best Elizabeth could tell. She laughed inside as her spirits rose to playfulness. Perhaps Mr. Hurst has a cousin. After breakfast, Jane and Elizabeth went out for a walk. The return of Mr. Bingley, as well as the immediacy of the wedding, encouraged the two sisters to spend as much of their available time together as possible. They were coming back from the garden when a stately carriage Elizabeth instantly recognised as belonging to Lady Catherine de Bourgh pulled up to the door. When the noble ladies stepped down from the carriage, Elizabeth introduced Lady Catherine to her eldest sister. Her ladyship made some remark about Jane's pending nuptials, and then made it clear she would prefer a private audience with Elizabeth, effectively sending Jane on her way inside the house alone. Chapter 4. Elizabeth and her unexpected visitor had not walked very far along the garden path before the latter began her brash speech. "No doubt you are asking yourself why I have travelled thus far to see you, Miss Bennet." With a look of sincere astonishment, Elizabeth replied, "Indeed, I am. But I rather suppose you were travelling nearby and determined it was your duty to pay a call to my family in light of our recently formed acquaintance." "On the contrary, I have come here directly from London with the express purpose of seeing you. I have received a most disturbing report from my nephew that he intends to offer his hand in marriage to a young woman of our mutual acquaintance in the very near future. I mean to learn the identity of the young woman and advise her of the absurdity of such a scheme." Immediately, Elizabeth thought of the Colonel. A possibility of an alliance in that quarter had crossed her mind, but as the second son of an earl, he had made it clear he needed to marry a woman of means. Elizabeth had given the matter very little thought since then. "Your nephew?" "Indeed, my nephew, Mr. Darcy." Mr. Darcy! The very mention of his name was sufficient to rob Elizabeth of her speech, but not enough to quiet her busy mind. Mr. Darcy! Elizabeth's silence encouraged her ladyship to go on. "I know you and he were no strangers to each other before meeting in Kent. I also did not fail to detect how attentive both of my nephews were towards you. However, I only recently learned that Darcy's attentiveness exceeded the normal bounds of cordiality. I learned the two of you spent a prodigious amount of time with each other outside my presence. Do you deny this assertion?" "I have no wish to deny it. I will say, however, that such an allegation does not necessarily mean your nephew's intentions towards me are as grand as you seem to suspect." "As I said, I do not know precisely whom my nephew alluded to when he and I spoke. Trust me when I say you are the last woman in the world whom I might have suspected on my own accord, but I have it on good authority that you and Darcy often engaged in long walks about the park on a near daily basis. I now suspect you were the reason he delayed his departure from Kent on more than one occasion." In Elizabeth's mind there could be only one person who had planted such a preposterous idea in her ladyship's mind, her sycophant cousin. "Did Mr. Collins tell you this?" Lady Catherine replied. "If you must know, my nephew Colonel Fitzwilliam told me all I needed to know to form my own conclusion, that you are the young woman whom my nephew Darcy spoke of fancying himself in love with, and with whom he would soon be reunited." "The Colonel!" Elizabeth exclaimed with energy. He, better than anyone, knew how much she did not like Mr. Darcy. Why would he be a party to any of what her ladyship said? "You seem surprised. Fitzwilliam himself told me that you and Darcy made no secret of all the time you were wont to spend in each other's company outside my presence. I insist you be forthcoming with me, young lady. Is there something more to your relationship with my nephew than that of indifferent acquaintances?" Although Elizabeth did not wish to be a willing party in reassuring Lady Catherine of anything, in this case she was powerless to do otherwise. Reluctantly, she said, "No, there is not." With that, her ladyship said, "That is all I need to know. I knew you were reasonable. As I said, I came here on the off chance the mystery woman might be you. However, if you will give me your assurance that there is no possibility my nephew will ever offer his hand to you, then I will be completely satisfied, and you shall never hear another word from me on the subject." "I cannot give you any assurances at all where your nephew's future actions are concerned, and as for my own, I am afraid I do not owe you any such promises." "Miss Bennet," her ladyship replied, her tone angry, "you ought to know I am not one to be trifled with. I know Darcy intends to attend your sister's wedding, which means the two of you will be thrown into each other's company. Your reluctance to declare explicitly how you might behave if tempted tells me that you, yourself, likely aspire to an advantageous alliance of your own. Let me be clear. A match between my nephew and you can never take place. Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now what have you to say?" "I say only this. If Mr. Darcy is engaged to your daughter, why would he tell you that he intends to offer his hand in marriage to another, to someone with whom he will soon be in company?" "The engagement between my nephew and my daughter is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy they have been intended for each other. It was the favourite wish of his mother as well as my own, while in their cradles we planned the union. It seems to me that the two of you did as much as you could in planning the marriage. Its completion depends on others, specifically Mr. Darcy and your daughter Miss de Bourgh. As I am no stranger to the supposed engagement, I took the liberty of observing the two of them in company when we were all in Kent, and I detected no symptoms of love on either of their parts. As I said, I have no idea of Mr. Darcy's intentions, except that clearly he does not intend to marry your daughter. Perhaps you would be wise to listen to him rather than waste your time and energy interviewing every young lady the gentleman has ever been in company with. Elizabeth was not done. She further stated, "Surely your nephew has the right to make his own choice. If I should happen to be that choice, what would you have altered by coming to my home with the design of dissuading me?" "You impertinent young woman, how dare you speak to me this way? How dare you dismiss my concerns about my nephew's intentions and even suggest you would be open to a proposal of marriage? Is this all the gratitude I am to expect for my attentions to you in Kent? Am I to understand that I am due nothing on that score?" Her ladyship glared at the younger woman. "I came to try you. I came to put to rest the possibility that you might be the young woman who stands in the way of the fulfillment of my greatest wish. Hear me when I say that, regardless of any false hope our discussion may have caused you to entertain, an alliance between you and my nephew will never occur. He will marry my daughter. I will carry my point." In this manner her ladyship talked on, while Elizabeth walked along beside her in silence until they were at the carriage. The servant stood by the open door and extended his hand to assist Lady Catherine when she turned hastily around. "I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. You deserve no such attention." Pursuant to Lady Catherine de Bourgh's troubling visit, the ensuing days leading up to Jane's wedding brought an odd mixture of joyfulness and anxiousness to Elizabeth's mind. Now, more than ever, she suffered from no insignificant measure of trepidation over the notion of seeing Mr. Darcy again. Has he really informed his aunt that he is soon to be reunited with the woman to whom he intends to extend an offer of marriage? Has he given her the strongest hint that said, "Woman is me"? If so, what was his purpose in leading his noble aunt to believe he and I are on the verge of establishing some sort of understanding? Had the gentleman really used her so abominably? If such were the case, how did he think he would commit such a transgression with impunity? The two of them never truly got along, despite all the time he spent in what she likened to stalking her in the lanes when they were in Kent. It had gotten to the point where she was almost expecting to encounter him on her daily rambles about the park, at which point he would unfailingly turn and accompany her. Despite all the odd questions he was wont to ask about her opinion on the Collinses' marriage and the idea of being settled too far from one's family, he never gave her any reason to suppose he held her in esteem. If anything, she suspected the gentleman did not like her, which was just fine with her because she did not like him either. I know with certainty that the gentleman merely tolerates me, and I never once endeavoured to earn his good opinion. Quite the contrary, for she had gone out of her way to loathe the gentleman upon hearing him proclaim to his friend Charles Bingley that she was not handsome enough to tempt him. If, on the other hand, Mr. Darcy was in no way implicit in planting such ideas in his aunt's head, why on earth does her ladyship presume he might fancy me? Elizabeth had more questions, and only one person had the answers. He would be arriving in Hertfordshire on the night before the wedding, according to Jane, who had it on good authority from Bingley. However, Elizabeth was rather certain she would not be seeing him. Surely a man who thought so highly of himself would not deign to come to Longbourn. As the wedding breakfast was to be celebrated at Netherfield, her eldest sister's future home, Elizabeth's confrontation with Mr. Darcy would have to wait until the wedding day. Chapter 5. Since speaking with Lady Catherine, Darcy was given to wonder if, indeed, a future with Miss Elizabeth Bennet might be possible. Now that the matter with Bingley and her sister had been settled, what possible objections could Miss Elizabeth have to an advantageous alliance of her own? Darcy's feelings for her had not waned one bit since he last saw her in Kent.
This trip to Hertfordshire might give me the opportunity to start anew with her,
he considered. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A servant entered the room and announced Darcy's visitor. It was Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Eschewing the usual civilities, his relations spoke directly on her purpose in being there. "You ought to know, nephew," she began. "I have recently returned from Hertfordshire." Unable to imagine what affairs his aunt had in Hertfordshire, Darcy said nothing, which encouraged her to continue speaking. "Do you not wish to know the nature of my business in that part of the country?"
"You no doubt wish to tell me, and I am not opposed to listening," he said.
Their last visit had not ended well, and had left a bit of ill feeling toward his aunt on Darcy's part. However, being the good nephew that he was always willing to lend an ear to whatever she had to say, as well as helpful counsel whenever she required it. "I called on Miss Elizabeth Bennet to discuss the matter of your misguided intention to marry someone other than my Anne." Endeavouring to maintain every appearance of composure, Darcy said,
"Why would you do such a thing?"
"I told you when I was last in this very room I would leave no stone unturned in my endeavour to discover the identity of the young woman to whom you intend to make an offer of marriage."
"Why did you single out Miss Elizabeth of all people?"
Darcy asked, even as he searched his mind to determine what he might have said or done to set his aunt on her course. "You said the young woman was a mutual acquaintance, someone whom you planned to be reunited with soon. Trust me, the last woman I would have suspected was that impertinent young lady. She is beneath you in every possible way. However, a conversation with your cousin Fitzwilliam compelled me to consider her." Darcy brushed his hands across his face.
"I wish you had not done that. You had no right."
"I assure you there was no harm in my going there. Even if you have forgotten what you are about, and even if you did single her out both in Hertfordshire and in Kent, I detected no symptom of affection on her part towards you." His aunt's words caused his chest to tighten. Even though his cousin had informed him as much, hearing the words aloud wounded him deeply. Lady Catherine said,
"That is not to say she would not be mercenary if sufficiently tempted. So long as you remember what you are about when you next meet that young lady, you will be quite safe from her. What is more, I assured her that, should she ever entertain the idea of marrying either of my nephews, I would not look kindly on such a match."
The time soon came for Darcy to join his friend Bingley in Hertfordshire. Despite Darcy having arrived at Netherfield Park 2 days earlier than he had originally planned, it seemed as though he and Elizabeth were always missing each other. When they would be in company, either of the two was surrounded by others whose purpose, it seemed, was to command the greatest share of their attention. That did not stop the gentleman from staring at her. The one exception was during the wedding ceremony, when the minister asked if there was anyone who could show just cause as to why the couple standing before him should not be lawfully wed. Elizabeth could not help bestowing Darcy a challenging glare. He, on the other hand, seemed miles away. While standing with everyone assembled outside the church, waiting for the newlywed Bingleys to get into their carriage and set off for the wedding breakfast, Elizabeth took advantage of the merriment to approach Mr. Darcy. She curtsied slightly. "Sir, I suspect you will find what I am about to say to you rather impertinent, even untoward, but unless I am mistaken, you can have no doubt why I must insist on a private audience with you before you return to town."
"Miss Bennet," he
said, bowing,
"would this have anything to do with my aunt's visit?"
"Indeed it does, sir. As you willingly admit to having knowledge of the visit, You surely will agree that you and I ought to discuss it."
"Yes,"
he said,
"in privacy."
"I can think of no alternative. My neighbours and friends might be diverted by the spectacle of the two of us debating your aunt's visit, but it would hardly satisfy my purposes."
"And what purposes would that be, if I might inquire?"
"Why, to understand what your aunt was about."
"Indeed, I am at your service, Miss Bennet. Pray tell me when and where you would like to meet to discuss my aunt's visit, and I will happily accommodate you."
It was then decided that the two of them would meet on the path leading to the gazebo at Netherfield Park shortly after the newlyweds took their leave of the wedding breakfast. Elizabeth was sure everyone else would be much too diverted by all the day's excitement to notice her absence. Having observed Miss Elizabeth most attentively whenever the two of them were in company, Darcy had seen no evidence to support his cousin's assertion that she did not like him. In fact, he observed in her those same pleasing qualities that made him fall in love with her from the start. Even if the lady had not sought him out, he surely would have endeavoured to speak with her before returning to town. His aunt's visit had raised questions in his mind that needed to be settled once and for all. Upon meeting at the appointed time and place, Elizabeth and Darcy fell into step beside each other as easily as they had always done when they were in Kent. Darcy felt it was incumbent on him to express a sense of regret for his aunt's officiousness.
"You must allow me to apologise for the manner in which Lady Catherine confronted you, Miss Bennet. I know not whether it resulted in your anger or an expectation of something more."
"Something more, Mr. Darcy? Do you mind elaborating?" Elizabeth asked, gradually putting some distance between the two of them.
"I am aware that she might have led you to believe I am intent on offering my hand in marriage to someone who is a mutual acquaintance of the two of us, my aunt and me, that is to say."
"Your aunt made it perfectly clear to me that she desired an alliance between you and your cousin, Miss Anne de Bourgh."
"I assure you, Miss Bennet, my aunt's wishes can have no influence on my decision for my future life, if that helps to put your mind at ease."
"My mind, sir? Let me assure you, whatever decisions you make for your future life do not affect my ease of mind in the slightest bit."
"I know how much you enjoy professing opinions that are not always your own. I suspect this is just another such instance."
"I beg your pardon, sir?"
"My aunt went away with the belief that your feelings for me were inconsequential. However, she does not know you so well as I do."
"Sir, I know you have a tendency to think rather too highly of yourself."
"On the contrary. If you were utterly decided against me, why did you not make your position clear when you spoke with my aunt?"
"As I informed Lady Catherine, I do not owe her any such assurances, nor do I owe such assurances to anyone who is so wholly unconnected to me."
"Are you certain that is the true reason?"
"What are you suggesting, sir, that I had an ulterior motive?" Staring at her pointedly, he arched his brow. "And what might that be?" Elizabeth exclaimed with energy. Darcy shrugged a little.
"Your sister has made a most advantageous match in marrying my friend Bingley. Perhaps you secretly wish for such a promising alliance as well."
"What sensible young lady does not aspire to an advantageous alliance, sir? However, if you suppose for a moment that I ever once entertained notions of such a prospect with you, then you are quite mistaken."
"There is no accounting for sensibility, for what woman whose prospects are, shall I say, as diminished as yours, would not entertain notions of an alliance such as one with someone of my stature affords? You and I are not strangers. It is not as though there has never been any form of intimacy between us that might have aroused your curiosity. I do not mind confessing that I have given the matter a great deal of consideration."
Elizabeth's astonishment was beyond expression. Had he voiced sentiments akin to those of his aunt? Had this been the basis for Lady Catherine's suspicions of an attachment between the two of them? She said nothing. Sufficiently encouraged by Elizabeth's silence, Darcy continued,
Indeed, I will further concede that, were it merely my heart that needed to be consulted, I would have suffered no hesitation at all in telling you it was not long after I met you that I began to feel the danger of my attraction to you. Seeing you again in Kent forced me to admit, albeit reluctantly, and certainly against my better judgment, that I had fallen in love with you. You cannot know how many times I wanted to tell you of my feelings, despite the degradation I was certain would follow as a consequence of the inferiority of your birth and the lack of standing of your family in comparison with my own. Had I followed my heart instead of my head, and offered my hand to you—
Elizabeth felt as though she was listening to Lady Catherine. Having heard enough, she took a determined step towards the gentleman. Her ire she did not repress. It is indeed a good thing you did think better of offering me your hand, for you have spared me the trouble of refusing you.
From speaking to the Colonel, I understand you were angry as a consequence of what you supposed was officiousness on my part, and your anger might have led you to act against your best interest, which is precisely why I decided not to offer my hand to you. You must have known the Colonel would have told me how the knowledge of my involvement in separating your sister and my friend had affected you. Certainly you must know, or at least suspect, that I did everything in my power to right the wrong done to your sister upon my return to London by advising Bingley that she was in town.
Are you suggesting I ought to be grateful to you for remedying an injury against my sister that you inflicted, sir?
No, that is not what I am suggesting. However, I would expect that you would not act against your own best interest, now that you are aware of my true feelings for you.
What I know is you have told me you fell in love with me against your better judgment, a sentiment that means little to me, if I am to be honest, for the fact is I do not even like you, sir. Indeed, it is a dislike not formed solely on the basis of your treatment of Jane, but rather your selfish disdain of the feelings of others, most particularly those of Mr. Wickham. Colouring with dismay, Darcy eased a step closer to Elizabeth.
Mr. Wickham,
he said,
this is not the first time you have made reference to my supposed ill treatment of that gentleman,
he added in a less than tranquil tone. Taking another step closer to her, and then another, he stood within inches of Elizabeth. Not one to be intimidated, she drew closer too. Now they were standing as close as two people could be. Growing angrier by the second, yet striving to maintain every appearance of composure, she asked, "Do you deny you withheld the advantages that were designed for him? And in so doing you have condemned him to his present state of poverty?" Her neck arched. Their faces were mere inches apart. "All this you have done for your own selfish purposes, and yet you regard him with contempt." His eyes locked with hers. His tone troubled and deeply affected, Darcy said,
"Is this truly your opinion of me?"
Never had he been so bewitched by any woman, so irresistibly drawn to any woman. This woman owned his heart, despite her biting words, and they were standing so close. Her scent filled him. He wanted only to take her in his arms, as he had longed to do so many times before. The heat radiating from their bodies, rendering it beyond his power to resist the taunting temptation she posed. He reached out his hand and slowly traced his fingers along her cheek. She did not protest, nor did she retreat. Her eyes challenging and full of fire, her lips parted. He leaned closer and closer. Moistening her lips, Elizabeth followed suit, and then they kissed, their heated debate seemingly forgotten, now evidencing itself in their locked lips. Darcy and Elizabeth fell easily into each other's embrace. A sound he wished to hear every day for the rest of his life escaped her, a soft, sweet moan. Elizabeth's reason warred with her body. Am I out of my senses to be kissing this man? She knew not what she was about, and she did not care. Her thoughts beckoned. This is the man whom I had once supposed was the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry. The man whose actions caused my dearest sister such pain. This man ruined Mr. Wickham. She pulled away. Whether angry with Mr. Darcy or with herself, she could not say. But she was angry, and she meant to show it. "How dare you, sir? And you would look down on Mr. Wickham, a true gentleman in whose company I have spent sufficient time to trust he would never behave in such a manner towards a young woman." The energy of their passion-filled kiss still lingering in the air, purposely wiping her hand against her mouth, Elizabeth turned and hurried away. Nothing mattered more at that moment than freeing herself of Mr. Darcy's presence. Chapter 6. Elizabeth awakened the next morning to the same bewildering thoughts and confounding ruminations which, at length, had accompanied her to sleep. She could not stop thinking about the kiss. She thought about George Wickham and all the times the two of them had spent in each other's company. She even recollected her time with the Colonel. She could not deny she had once or twice imagined either of the two gentlemen as being the first to kiss her, but never once had she imagined being kissed by Mr. Darcy. How is it possible that a man whom I never liked could make me forget everything I am about and lose myself in his arms, even for a second? What she needed was a solitary ramble about the countryside to dwell on what she might have done or said to encourage his affection, and thus she set out early that morning. Walking along at that hour reminded her of the many occasions she had encountered Mr. Darcy while strolling the lanes at Rosings Park. She wondered if accompanying her on her walks had been his manner of courting her. Then she caught a glimpse of the gentleman heading her way. She did not know whether to turn back or to stay her course. She had done nothing wrong, she supposed. Why should my morning exercise be impeded by his presence? Thus resolved, she continued walking, and soon they were close enough to each other for her to see he was holding a letter. His composure haughty, he said,
"I have been walking on this path for some time in the hopes of meeting you. Will you do me the honour of reading this letter?"
He handed it to her. Instinctively she took it. Then, with a slight bow, Mr. Darcy turned and soon was out of sight. The strongest curiosity compelled Elizabeth to open the letter, and to her increasing wonder she saw 2 sheets of paper written in a very close hand. Continuing her way along the path, she began reading it.
"I beg you to pardon the impropriety of receiving this letter. My conscience obliges me to address the events that recently unfolded between us. For your happiness as well as my own, past wishes and sentiments cannot be too soon forgotten. That I am demanding your attention in a manner that, were it known to others, would be deemed improper, I have weighed the advantages and disadvantages, and I have concluded it is in your strongest interest to read what I have to convey. It has to do with Mr. Wickham. You have compared that gentleman with me, and found me wanting. Consequently, I feel I must attempt to acquaint you with a better understanding of his true character, if for no other reason than to prevent your good opinion of him from putting you in harm's way. The story Wickham likely told you is one I have heard repeated time and again. Not only has he repeated his tale to others with alacrity, but he has also espoused his beliefs to me. He will have told you that I denied him the living in Kympton that should have been his, as stipulated in my excellent father's will. He will have told you that he was my father's godson, indeed my father's favourite, and for that reason he will have accused me of being jealous. By your complaints against me, he will have told you that I severely injured him, not merely in this matter, but in others as well.
Here Elizabeth paused, for if the intent of Mr. Darcy's letter was merely to justify his deplorable conduct against Mr. Wickham, she was not certain she wished to read more. Everything she had read was in keeping with Wickham's own narrative. When it came to Mr. Wickham and Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth felt strongly that she owed her allegiance to the former. Still, her curiosity prevented her from simply folding the letter and tucking it away until she could properly dispose of it. She continued reading.
What Wickham will not have mentioned is that he was the one who disavowed the living. Mr. Wickham wrote to inform me that, having finally resolved against taking orders, he hoped I should not think it unreasonable for him to expect some more immediate pecuniary advantage, in lieu of the preferment by which he could not be benefited. He said he had some intention of studying law, and that the interest of £1,000 would be a very insufficient support therein. Wishing rather than believing him to be sincere, I was perfectly ready to accede to his proposal. I knew Mr. Wickham ought not to be a clergyman. Indeed, my father had the highest opinion of him, and hoping the church would be his profession, intended to provide for him in it. As for myself, it is many, many years since I first began to think of him in a very different manner. The vicious propensities, the want of principle which he was careful to guard from the knowledge of my father, could not escape the observation of a young man of nearly the same age with himself, and who had opportunities of seeing him in unguarded moments, which my father could not have. The business was therefore soon settled. Wickham resigned all claim to assistance in the church, were it possible that he could ever be in a situation to receive it, and accepted in return £3,000. All connection between us seemed now dissolved.
In walking as well as in reading, Elizabeth's pace intensified. Can this be true? Her need to know more would not be suppressed. She resumed reading.
I thought too ill of him to invite him to Pemberley or admit his society in London. He chiefly lived in town, but his studying the law was a mere pretence, and, being now free from all restraint, his life was that of idleness and dissipation. For about 3 years I heard little of him, but when the living became available, he applied to me again by letter for the presentation. He assured me that his circumstances were exceedingly bad, and I had no difficulty in believing it. He had found the law a most unprofitable study, and was now absolutely resolved on being ordained if I would present him to the living in question, of which he trusted there could be little doubt, as he was well assured I had no other person to provide for it, and I could not have forgotten my revered father's intentions. You will hardly blame me for refusing to comply with this entreaty, or for resisting every repetition to it. His resentment was in proportion to the distress of his circumstances, and he was doubtless as violent in his abuse of me to others as in his reproaches to myself. After this period every appearance of acquaintance was dropped. How he lived I know not, but last summer he painfully obtruded on my notice once again.
Elizabeth shook her head in wonderment. Indeed, if half of what Mr. Darcy says is true, then he was entirely within his right not to entertain Mr. Wickham's subsequent applications. She read on.
I shall rely upon your secrecy for what I am about to disclose.
These words gave Elizabeth pause, for she did not suppose she owed Mr. Darcy any such loyalty as that. On the other hand, the two of them had shared intimacies, the likes of which others would easily frown on, their kiss being one, and now the letter. Silently vowing that whatever Mr. Darcy was about to reveal would be yet another secret between the two of them, she stopped walking and sat down in an inviting spot in the grass to continue reading. Mr. Darcy gave her a full accounting of Mr. Wickham's attempt to seek revenge against him by following Darcy's young sister, Miss Georgiana Darcy, to Ramsgate, and persuading the young girl of 15 to elope with him. However, Darcy had arrived in time to prevent his sister from falling victim to Wickham's scheme. Her dowry of £30,000 thereby out of his reach, Wickham fled Ramsgate, leaving a broken-hearted Miss Darcy without even saying goodbye. In conclusion, the letter read,
This, madam, is a faithful narrative of the events surrounding my supposed injury of Mr. Wickham. I have told you this not to defend my own conduct. I should not have behaved as I did when you and I were together. To say that I am a man who is violently in love, though wholly insufficient in light of the manner in which we parted, is my only excuse. As Bingley is my closest friend, and you are his wife's sister, no doubt the possibility of our being brought together at some future time is strong. Please rest assured there shall be no repetition of the sentiments and, more importantly, those actions that were so reprehensible to you. In closing, I will only add, God bless you. Fitzwilliam Darcy.
All of Elizabeth's prejudices against Mr. Darcy went away upon subsequently reading his letter. Her own words in defence of Mr. Wickham reverberated in her mind. She had been the one to defend this man's character when others dared to disparage him. She had lauded his intentions toward another young woman, a Miss Mary King, who had recently inherited £10,000, when it was so plain for others to see that his motives were solely and hatefully mercenary. She felt disheartened by Miss Darcy's situation, but thankful the young girl had a loving protector in her older brother. But what of other young girls who would fall victim to Wickham's charms? Elizabeth could not resist asking herself. It did give her some comfort to know that despite her own young sister Lydia likely being in frequent company with Wickham in Brighton, her lack of fortune would allow her to escape his notice. Perhaps my family's mediocre means kept me from any real danger from Mr. Wickham as well. Despite her good fortune in that respect, Elizabeth could not help questioning her own behaviour. By now, having recollected every particular of her past conversations with the gentleman in light of the partiality she now afforded Mr. Darcy, she grew absolutely ashamed of herself. I have always prided myself a fair studier of people, and yet in this instance I have been blind, prejudiced, and even absurd. From the very beginning I was so pleased with Mr. Wickham's preference and so offended by Mr. Darcy's neglect that I have wilfully courted prepossession and ignorance. She felt a tinge of regret in concert with increasing realization. I have lost the admiration of an honourable man, and driven him away at a time when I have learned what having his good opinion truly means. Chapter 7. Hardly a month later, Mr. Collins and his wife were shown into the parlour at Rosings. Bowing reverently to its occupants, Lady Catherine, her daughter Miss Anne de Bourgh, and her esteemed guest Mr. Darcy, Mr. Collins proceeded directly to where her ladyship sat.
Thank you for granting me this audience, your ladyship. Indeed, Mrs. Collins and I are aware of the great honour you have bestowed upon us, and we are for ever in your debt.
Lady Catherine was never one to shy away from the high praise she knew was her due, but, on the other hand, she did not like to be imposed on by others when she felt she had better things to do. You have asked for this time, Mr. Collins, and I have granted it to you. Now, be quick about your purpose in wishing to see me so you can be on your way.
Indeed, your ladyship, indeed.
Here he bowed again and then commenced speaking.
In view of the highly revered connection between us, I believe it is absolutely incumbent on me to be the one to bring you what I am sure is most alarming news from Hertfordshire.
He cleared his throat.
It has to do with the Bennets of Longbourn.
Startled, it was all Darcy could do not to lower his paper and attend to the unfolding conversation. However, the last thing he wanted to do was encourage his aunt's vicar. He would not even be in Kent if not for his aunt making some excuse of needing him there to oversee an urgent matter concerning her steward. "Pray go on, Mr. Collins," Lady Catherine demanded.
Mrs. Collins and I have learned that one of the Bennet daughters has thrown herself into the power of a Mr. Wickham.
Directing his gaze at Mr. Darcy, Collins said,
"The son of the late Mr. Darcy's steward."
Now the vicar really had Darcy's attention. A stunned sense of foreboding overtook him.
Has George Wickham returned to Hertfordshire and imposed himself on the Bennets? Did Elizabeth wilfully ignore my reproofs against that man?
He felt his colour rising. Collins continued speaking.
Indeed, Miss Lydia Bennet, the youngest daughter of the five, has left the protection of the couple charged with her supervision in Brighton, a Colonel Forster and his young wife.
Darcy silently offered a prayer in gratitude that his Elizabeth was not the Bennet daughter in question.
My Elizabeth,
he considered. He tucked in part of his lower lip in remembrance of their kiss, ever lingering in his lonely mind.
She will never be mine.
Effectively drawn into the conversation, Darcy lowered his paper. Mr. Collins now looked directly at Darcy as he spoke, as if he knew how this information would affect the other man.
The couple was said to be headed to Gretna Green to be married, but it has since been discovered that the officer never intended to wed the young girl. They have gone entirely unaccounted for. Their whereabouts are completely unknown to the family.
Lady Catherine reared her head in indignation. Before she could speak, Collins said,
Allow me to assure you, your ladyship, that my wife and I have nothing to do with the shame attached to the Bennet family. Indeed, I have written to my cousin Mr. Bennet and instructed him in the strongest language that he must have nothing at all to do with this business. I have prevailed on my cousin not to intercede on his wayward daughter's behalf, for in doing so he would merely condone the shameful behaviour.
As you very well should have, Lady Catherine insisted. That family is ruined. I contend it would be far better if the girl were dead. Meanwhile, Darcy, having given up his pretence of ignoring the parson, was pacing the floor.
This is my fault,
he silently considered.
If I had been open with the Bennets, even my friend Bingley, they would have known about Wickham's low propensities.
Lady Catherine said, No doubt you are congratulating yourself, nephew, in having escaped a connection with such a family, despite your past attentiveness to Miss Elizabeth Bennet, though I can hardly say the same of your friend Charles Bingley. She raised her head in a proud manner, but given his standing in society was tenuous at best. The damage, though severe, is not nearly so devastating as it would have been for someone of your stature. He ceased his pacing and fixed his stare on his aunt.
I take no comfort in the fact that the Bennet family's reputation is now tarnished, Lady Catherine. I take umbrage at you suggesting I would. I am troubled on behalf of the Bennets as well as my friend Bingley.
That is all the more reason that you must cut ties with the young man. With such a sister, no decent family will receive him, his wife, or his own unmarried sister. Darcy told his aunt that he would do no such thing as cut ties with his friend Bingley. He further declared,
I rather suppose I owe it to my friend to do all that is in my power to bring about a happier conclusion than any of them have reason to expect.
How do you suppose it is your responsibility? Is that not the duty of the wild girl's father and her uncles?
If I had told Mr. Bennet all I know of Wickham's disreputable character, the gentleman might have taken greater care in preventing his youngest daughter from becoming Wickham's victim.
You cannot know that. What right does the girl have to be out in society at 15, long before 3 of her older sisters are married? Mr. Bennet ought to have exercised greater prudence. He has no one to blame but himself for his daughter's disgraceful behaviour. You would be wise to avoid this matter in its entirety.
My conscience will not allow it. I will not stand idly by and watch the reputation of an entire family be ruined.
Darcy walked over to the side table and poured himself a drink. George Wickham had not acted alone in his attempt to seduce Darcy's sister all those months ago in Ramsgate. A Mrs. Young, Georgiana's former companion, had been Wickham's accomplice. Darcy would not dismiss the possibility that Wickham had prevailed on that despicable woman once again.
How else might one explain Wickham's ability to disappear with young Lydia Bennet so expeditiously and remain hidden for so long?
Slamming the glass on the table, Darcy spun around and headed towards the door. "Where are you going, nephew?"
"I have a fair idea of where I might find George Wickham. I only pray I am not too late."
"Indeed, it is too late. That girl is ruined. Her entire family is ruined. You are wasting your time."
"I may very well be wasting my time, but at the very least I will have tried."
Lady Catherine learned some weeks later from Mr. Collins that the young Bennet girl had married George Wickham. Recalling Darcy's peculiar response to the news of the Bennet family's ruin, as well as his urgent departure from Kent, unsettled her ladyship more than she liked. Suspecting but not wishing to believe her favourite nephew had been the means of resolving the scandalous affair, her ladyship set off for London to ascertain the truth. She would have no success in garnering the truth from Darcy. Therefore she went to her brother's home, Matlock House, where she knew she would find her nephew, Colonel Fitzwilliam. All that was required on her part was some hint to the Colonel that she was already familiar with some of the particulars. Scarcely the work of a moment was needed subsequently to learn the full extent of Darcy's involvement in the Wickham affair. Lady Catherine was appalled. More than that, she was puzzled. By the Colonel's account, Darcy had done it all. He paid for Wickham's commission in the north. He paid that loathsome man's gambling debts that stretched from Meryton to Brighton. He even attended the wedding. Her aggrieved nature screamed that her nephew had acted as he did on behalf of Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Yet he had not ventured to Hertfordshire to bask in that woman's gratitude. Perhaps he simply wants opportunity, Lady Catherine concluded. She knew from Mr. and Mrs. Collins that the newlywed Bingleys had not yet returned from their wedding journey. Her ladyship suspected that was the reason her nephew had not yet gone to Hertfordshire. Determined to prevent her nephew from making what she was certain would be the greatest mistake of his life, her ladyship now knew precisely what she must do. That impertinent country upstart had not heard the last from Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Chapter 8. Elizabeth was amazed. She was shocked. She was silent. Once again she found herself walking along the garden path, accompanied by a most unexpected and equally unwanted guest. It was Lady Catherine de Bourgh. The things her ladyship said had robbed Elizabeth of her composure, and it was all she could do not to show it. Lady Catherine exclaimed, "Do you dare pretend this is the first you have heard of my nephew's role in this sordid affair?" "This is the first I have ever heard of it," Elizabeth cried with energy. Indeed, by her uncle Mr. Gardiner's account, he had been the principal party in Lydia's recovery. What was more, having resolved himself to the fact that Lydia and her husband were not to be received at Longbourn, her father had been so advised as well. After the trials her family had suffered in the wake of Lydia's shameful behaviour and its aftermath on their reputations, the Bennets were much too relieved when they learned Lydia had married Mr. Wickham to ask too many questions about how it had all come about. "How can you suppose the facts, as you have disclosed them, are true?" "This is my own nephew that we are discussing. Nothing that goes on in my family goes unnoticed by me. I know it all." Her ladyship drew closer. "I left you some time ago with the distinct impression that your feelings for my nephew were not nearly so strong as they might be. But now that he has gone through such trouble on your family's behalf, I fear you may be tempted to accept his proposal should he make you an offer, more out of a sense of gratitude rather than any true affection. It is for that reason I have come here to offer you a proposal of my own, an inducement, if you will, to abstain from any further contact with my nephew. I beg your pardon, your ladyship. Do not suppose I am ignorant of the true extent of your family's rather meagre fortune. Despite your eldest sister's advantageous alliance with a young man of some means, that gentleman is hardly in a position to provide for you, your mother, and your two unwed sisters Should some unfortunate fate befall your father, Mr. Collins would be well within his right to throw all of you into the hedgerows. I, for one, would insist that he does. However, if you will give me the assurance I require that you will never accept an offer of marriage from my nephew Darcy, I shall see to it that you have enough to provide for your entire family. I have extensive property and wealth at my disposal, and I am prepared to be very generous. A house in town, dowries for you and your sisters. I will not agree to such an offensive proposal. I prevail on you to be sensible, young woman. You can have no reason to suppose my nephew will ever make you an offer of marriage. You cannot know that he did not act out of some misguided notion of wanting to right a wrong for which he somehow blames himself. He has not sought you out. He likely never will. If you really suppose what you're saying to be true, why did you take the trouble of coming all this way and attempt to bend me to your will with bribery and threats? I mean to remove all doubt where my nephew is concerned. I mean to place the two of you beyond each other's reach for the remainder of all time. You are an intelligent young woman. You cannot pretend to be ignorant of the advantages of my proposal. Or perhaps you mean to exact a grander prize in exchange for your cooperation. You have widely mistaken my character in supposing that I can be worked on by such persuasions as you propose. Elizabeth turned back. You have insulted me in every possible method, and as the two of us can have nothing more to say to each other, I must beg to return to the house, and I must beg you to leave. Lady Catherine seized Elizabeth's arm. Not so hasty, young woman. If you do not oblige me, and perchance my nephew offers his hand to you, surely you must consider that a marriage to you would disgrace him in every way. He would be ruined in the opinion of all his friends, and he would be held in contempt in the eyes of the world. Your alliance would be an abomination. No decent family would receive you. Surely your gratitude for all that my nephew has done for your family must prevent you from being the means of him losing his good standing. Jerking away, Elizabeth replied, Again, your ladyship, I am under no obligation to grant you the assurances you seek with respect to what your nephew may or may not do. However well Mr. Darcy tolerates your excessive interference in his life is a matter between the two of you, but, as I have said, you have no such power over me. With that said, I really must prevail on you to leave my home at once. I further demand that you never impose on me in this manner again. Having said all she intended to say, Elizabeth hurried in another direction, leaving Lady Catherine standing there contesting with herself.
Well, I have never been treated thusly in all my life. Trust me when I say I take no pleasure in finding myself in such a place as this. Such a family as yours deserves no such consideration from me.
Whatever manner in which her ladyship concluded her tirade, Elizabeth could not know with certainty. She did not care. Her ladyship's revelation about Mr. Darcy had affected her more than she dared to confess. She needed time alone to consider the implications of Lady Catherine's words, away from her excitable mamma, who would surely want to know the purpose of the grand lady's visit, away from the inquiring eyes of her younger sisters, and the sarcasm-riddled looks of her papa, away from everyone. All she could think about was Mr. Darcy. He had been the means of saving her family's reputation, and not her uncle, as her entire family, including her father, had been led to believe. Her heart could not help whispering that everything Mr. Darcy had done, he had done for her. Chapter 9. Not merely contented with Lady Catherine's acerbic account of Mr. Darcy's role in Lydia's recovery, and thus her entire family's salvation, Elizabeth wrote to her aunt Mrs. Gardiner in town to learn what had really happened. Elizabeth had the satisfaction of receiving an answer to her letter as soon as she possibly could. She was no sooner in possession of it than, hurrying into a little copse where she was least likely to be interrupted, she sat down on one of the benches and prepared to be fully enlightened, for the length of the letter convinced her that Lady Catherine's claims bore merit. Skimming past the usual pleasantries that were to be expected in a letter from her favourite aunt, she slowed her reading pace exceedingly with the mention of Mr. Darcy's name. Mere days after your father's return to Longbourn, your uncle had a most unexpected visitor. Mr. Darcy called, and he was shut up with him for several hours. I can rightly assert that your uncle's surprise in receiving a visit from a gentleman of such consequence, one whom neither of us could boast of having met theretofore, was no less than my own. He came to tell Mr. Gardiner that he had found out where your sister and Mr. Wickham were, and that he had seen and talked with them both. He had learned of their supposed elopement while visiting his relations in Kent, and he came to town with the resolution of hunting for them. The motive professed was his conviction of its being owing to himself that Wickham's worthlessness had not been so well known as to make it impossible for any young woman of character to love or confide in him. He generously imputed the whole to his mistaken pride, and confessed that he had before thought it beneath him to lay his private actions open to the world, believing his character was to speak for itself. He called it, therefore, his duty to step forward and endeavour to remedy an evil that had been brought on by himself. The gentleman had been some days in town before he was able to discover them, but he had something to direct his search, which was more than we had, for there is a lady, it seems, a Mrs. Young, who was some time ago governess to Miss Darcy, and was dismissed from her charge on some cause of disapprobation, though he did not say what. Elizabeth quickly scanned the next paragraph or two, for they confirmed what she already supposed was true, based upon Mr. Darcy's own mentioning of Mrs. Young and her disgusting character. Picking up on her aunt's letter, Elizabeth read that which seemed to confirm all that Lady Catherine had suggested, that Mr. Darcy had taken it entirely upon himself to secure a happier resolution to the Wickham debacle than any of them had reason to hope for. Upon meeting with Mr. Darcy and hearing the whole of what he had done, your uncle and he battled it together for a long time, for the latter had done too much, and ought to be repaid for all he had done for two people who were so little deserving of such benevolence. However, in the end, your uncle was forced to yield, and instead was forced to put up with only having the probable credit of it, which went sorely against the grain. I really believe your letter this morning gave him great pleasure, because it required an explanation that would rob him of his borrowed feathers, and give the praise where it was due. But, Lizzie, this must not go beyond yourself, or Jane at most. You know pretty well, I suppose, what has been done for the young people. Wickham's debts were paid, amounting, I believe, to considerably more than £1,000. Another 1,000 in addition to her own was settled upon her, and his commission purchased. The reason that all this was to be done by him alone was such as I have given above. It was owing to him, to his reserve and want of proper consideration, that Wickham's character had been so misunderstood, and consequently that he had been received and noticed as he was. Perhaps there was some truth in this, though I doubt whether his reserve alone can be answerable for the event. But in spite of all this fine talking, my dear Lizzie, you may rest perfectly assured that your uncle would never have yielded if we had not given the young man credit for another interest in the affair. However, as neither of you has done or said anything that would give credence to our suppositions, I hope they will not afford you any displeasure. If, on the other hand, such suppositions are well-founded based upon even the slightest symptoms of affection, I must confess that I find Mr. Darcy's manners and comportment to be all that is pleasing in my estimation. Indeed, he is everything a gentleman ought to be. Yours, very sincerely, M. Gardiner. Her aunt's letter gave Elizabeth much to consider. That her aunt, whose opinion Elizabeth revered, was favourably impressed by Mr. Darcy was no small matter. Elizabeth's last letter from Jane confirmed that the news of Lydia's elopement had been received, and that Jane and Bingley were on their way home. Thanks to Mr. Darcy, good news would greet them upon their arrival. A part of Elizabeth desperately wished the former would return to Netherfield too. After the cold manner of their parting, she did not suppose it meant he might offer his hand to her in marriage, but it surely meant he cared enough about her to go through so much trouble and expense to save her family's reputation from ruin. She lifted her fingers to her lips, as she often did when thinking of Mr. Darcy. The kiss they shared was seared into her memory. That, coupled with the letter he had written, with confidences of Wickham's harmful intentions towards Miss Georgiana Darcy, had also made a lasting impression on her heart. She had misunderstood Mr. Darcy entirely. Everything she ever knew about him, she now recollected with favour. He indeed was a kind, a benevolent, and an honourable man. If I could but see Mr. Darcy again, she now considered. First, she would thank him for his kindness towards her family, even if his doing so had nothing at all to do with some lingering tender feelings for her, as Lady Catherine suggested, but in service to his friend instead, a strong inducement in and of itself, and a true testament of a gentleman of Mr. Darcy's character. Secondly, she would apologise to him for ever having formed such an ill opinion of him on the basis of the testimony of a man who had proved to possess less than an ounce of Mr. Darcy's integrity. Time passed, and once again Elizabeth and Jane were united. When all there was to discuss unreservedly regarding the Wickham debacle and subsequent resolution by way of a hasty marriage was discussed, Elizabeth was at liberty to share those private matters with her sister Jane that had at first been conveyed to her by Lady Catherine de Bourgh and later confirmed by Mrs. Gardiner. Still, Jane could not understand why Mr. Darcy would do such a thing, her thought being that such a selfless and costly venture must surely be attributable to more than loyalty to his friend. Jane's uncertainties gave cause to Elizabeth to confide in her sister the other factors that may have given rise to Mr. Darcy's unparalleled kindness. She told her sister all she could about the true nature of her past acquaintance with the gentleman, only leaving out the parts that might cause Jane pain. She even told her sister about the kiss. "Why did you not tell me any of this before?" Jane asked. "I have no excuse except to say I could hardly believe it myself. I never once endeavoured to earn Mr. Darcy's good opinion, as you and I both know. And yet you have managed to secure it, for only the deepest affection would have persuaded the gentleman to do all he has done for you." "Oh, Jane, we cannot know that with certainty." "Can we not, Lizzie?" "You said he admitted to admiring you most ardently, to being in love with you. Surely you must suspect, in light of this evidence, that he continues to care for you." "After the uncivil manner of our parting, I am afraid to allow myself the tiniest hope," Elizabeth said. "What is more, it has been weeks since the aforementioned events unfolded, and there has been no evidence of his constancy. It seems your feelings for Mr. Darcy have undergone quite an alteration for the better." She would not deny it, lying to her dearest sister, and, worse than that, to her own heart, would be pointless, but she would not confess it aloud. She would only do that if she were sure of the gentleman's feelings towards her. Elizabeth said, "If I could but see him. At the very least, I might thank him on behalf of our family." Jane's eyes lit up. "You cannot know how overjoyed I am to hear that your opinion of Mr. Darcy has improved so dramatically. I have always held him in the highest regard." Her spirits rising to playfulness, Elizabeth said, "I shall not credit you in that respect, for you think the whole world is good." Jane laughed a little. "Indeed, I try. However, it is plain for me to see that you now hold Mr. Darcy in the highest regard as well, and there is no wonder, for there is something about the gentleman, something in his air that gives a very favourable impression of his heart." Elizabeth did not want to refute her sister, and thus she smiled and said nothing. Jane continued, I shall speak with Charles and encourage him to invite your Mr. Darcy to Hertfordshire. Pray you do not plan to play matchmaker, for I am certain I cannot be a party to such a scheme. Matchmaker! I would not use that term. On the contrary, I believe Charles would benefit from a visit from his friend on matters concerning the estate. Matchmaking indeed, Jane said. Trust me, Lizzie, I know exactly what I am about. Chapter 10. As she often did when endeavouring to escape her mother's frequent hints that she ought to go to town and stay with the Gardiners, with the goal of landing a husband, Elizabeth was staying with her sister Jane at Netherfield, when the news was received that Darcy had accepted Bingley's invitation. She took some comfort in knowing that by the time of his scheduled arrival she would be back at Longbourn. As much as she wanted to see the gentleman again, she did not want to be seen as forcing herself in his company. No one in the Netherfield party could have expected Mr. Darcy to arrive a week earlier than originally planned. Not only that, but he arrived while all of the family was elsewhere. Jane and Bingley had gone into Meryton, and Elizabeth was out walking about the grounds. Having been informed of this upon entering the house, Darcy did not waste a moment before setting out in search of her. Bingley's invitation, though absent anything having to do with his new sister, in combination with his aunt's last visit to town, had taught him to hope, as he had never allowed himself to hope before, that Elizabeth's heart may have warmed towards him. He wandered for nearly an hour and was about to give up and return to the house when he spotted her sitting under a giant tree, cradling her knees to her breast. He immediately went to her. Standing, she brushed off the back of her dress and curtsied. "Mr. Darcy," she said. Darcy bowed.
"Miss Bennet."
"I thought you were planning to arrive next week."
"No, well, yes,"
he said, his voice tentative.
"I decided to come earlier. The truth is, I wanted to see you. I wanted to apologize to you for my aunt's interference. Again."
"Sir, you need not apologize. As unpleasant as her ladyship's visit was, had she not come and told me all that you did on behalf of my family, I might never have known how indebted we are to you. Let me thank you again and again in the name of my family for all that you have done. The generous compassion you exercised in the recovery of my sister finds us forever in your debt." He shook his head a little.
"If you will thank me,"
Darcy replied,
"let it be for yourself alone. My wish of giving happiness to you, in addition to other inducements, is what compelled me to act as I did, and as much as I respect your family, they owe me nothing, for I cannot deny that I thought only of you."
His open and honest words only partially confirmed what her heart longed to believe, but her uncertainty rendered her speechless. After a short pause, Mr. Darcy added,
"You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings as regards accepting my hand in marriage are what they were when we last parted, please tell me at once, and I shall remain silent on the subject forever."
Her continued silence encouraged him.
"My feelings are as ardent now as they ever were. I love you."
Her heart now perfectly satisfied, her mind teeming with sentiments she theretofore never allowed herself to entertain, Elizabeth forced herself to reply, however ineloquently, that her sentiments had undergone a material change indeed. When he offered his hand to her in the ensuing moments, she responded as warmly as a young lady who deeply admired and esteemed a gentleman ought to. As Lady Catherine de Bourgh had been an unwilling party in furthering their current understanding, Elizabeth could not help remarking, "There are those, your aunt in particular, who will accuse me of accepting your proposal out of some misguided sense of gratitude as opposed to any true affection, but let me assure you those people would be wrong." Elizabeth bit her lower lip, and for a moment allowed herself to remember, just as she had done so often of late, the soft touch of his own. She said, "My feelings have been growing for some time. Your letter, for one, made a favourable impression on my heart. I am gratified that you would confide such a private matter to me. I am afraid I misjudged you terribly. Please accept my apology."
"Please do not apologize. In truth, I ought to have been more forthcoming with you upon first making your acquaintance. I might easily have confided in you what I knew of Wickham's true character, when I first realized that he had encroached upon your good opinion. However, I thought only of my own interests. I felt it absolutely incumbent upon myself to redress any harm that came to your family as a result of my efforts to protect my own. I wish another resolution other than your sister, and thus your family, being aligned with Wickham until the end of time had been within my power. But if it is any consolation, I believe Mrs. Wickham considers herself the luckiest woman in the world."
"I suppose that is a consolation of sorts, although I doubt her dear husband counts himself the luckiest man in the world."
"No, I believe that claim belongs solely to me,"
he said, smiling.
"You cannot know how much it means to me knowing that you and I will be husband and wife. I am so proud finally to admit it freely and openly, as I have been longing to do."
"You have an advantage over me in that regard, sir, although I do not mind admitting that I shall enjoy catching up with you immensely. I can think of no better way to start than this," said Elizabeth. She ceased walking and turned to face him, compelling him to do likewise. She reached up and smoothed her fingers along his face. Seizing her hand in his, Darcy rested his free hand on her chin. Leaning closer to each other, the two lovers kissed. Tender at first, their kiss grew ever so passionate. Elizabeth's thoughts returned to their first kiss, but only for an instant. This kiss was so much better, and she did not wish to miss a second of it. When at last their lips parted, they rested their foreheads together. At length Darcy said,
"When shall we announce our happy news?"
Elizabeth wanted to hold off. "Pray, you will not be disappointed by what I am about to propose, sir. You see, as I am already staying at Netherfield as my sister's guest, I am certain my mother will have no objection to me extending my visit. I can think of no better way for the two of us to spend time in each other's company without calling too much attention to ourselves as you and I get better acquainted."
"I am not disappointed. I believe I shall enjoy this time with you immensely. However, we must not wait too long, for the sooner you and I announce our engagement, the sooner you and I can be married, and the sooner I can carry you away to Pemberley, where the two of us shall live happily for ever after."
She arched her brow. "Happily for ever after? That sounds very much like the substance of fairy tales, Mr. Darcy. Surely two people whose temperaments are as similar as ours will have more than our share of anguish and adversity, to say nothing of our well-meaning and not so well-meaning relations." She silently reflected.
"No doubt, for we both like to have our own way. However, as the two of us want the same things in life, a marriage based on mutual respect and admiration, dare I say the deepest affection, and a happy home filled with children, I have every reason to suspect our future life together indeed holds the most promising of prospects."
"Then that settles it, sir," Elizabeth said, her face beaming with joy. "You and I are to be the happiest couple in the world." They continued their walk in silence, still holding hands until they came to a place in their current path that led to a secluded spot that Elizabeth had learned to enjoy immensely since her sister became mistress of Netherfield. "Come with me, sir," she said, urging him along in the new direction. That Elizabeth had ever discovered such a place was purely by happenstance. A frisky fawn and an abundance of curiosity had led her there initially. A tiny stream flowing gently alongside a long ago abandoned trail in the middle of nowhere kept bringing her back.
"This is a lovely spot indeed,"
Darcy said, while taking in the surrounding sights and sounds.
It brings to mind a similar spot in Pemberley Woods that I can hardly wait to show you."
Elizabeth looked surprised to hear him make such a claim. "Sir, I have never travelled to Derbyshire, but in my mind I can scarcely envision anything beyond rocks and mountains as far as the eyes can see."
"There is that, but I assure you that Derbyshire boasts of the most magnificent landscapes with no awkward embellishments to detract from their abundance of natural beauty. When you first arrive at Pemberley Woods, you will ride for some time through a beautiful wood stretching over a wide extent, and then gradually ascend for half a mile to the top of a considerable eminence, where the wood ceases, and instantly your eye will be caught by Pemberley House."
His voice taking on an air of nostalgia, he added,
"It is a large, handsome stone building standing well on rising ground and backed by a ridge of high, woody hills. In front of the house is a stream, its banks neither formal nor falsely adorned."
Elizabeth was as enraptured by this description of her future home as its proud owner was in describing it to her. "Pemberley sounds perfect, Mr. Darcy. No doubt you miss your home very much and are eager to return." Taking her hand in his, he raised it to his lips. His voice tender, Darcy replied,
"Indeed, I miss Pemberley, and I look forward to seeing it again. However, I feel strongly that my home is with you, and as I never wish to be parted from you from this day forward, so long as we are together, I am exactly where I want to be."
The end. Thank you for listening to every appearance of Composure, written by nom de plume Eden Forster and read by Anna, a professional human voice replica. Copyright 2016 by P.O. Dixon, with production copyright 2024. I hope you enjoyed the story and encourage you to like and comment to share your thoughts. What's more, if you enjoyed the story, why not explore my channel for even more captivating tales? With over 100 hours of professionally narrated audiobooks, along with titles read by the author as well as titles digitally narrated by professional human voice replicas, there's always another adventure waiting for you. I hope you'll keep listening and discover your next favourite story here.